We did. I did talk a little bit about this in the past. Um, Briefly mention it, and I feel a little bit bad. There's some questions that came up last test in regards to this. But number one, let's talk a little bit about the actual format of in accounting. In class, and I told you this day one that using a pencil is totally 100% fine, right? Because you're going to be making mistakes and have the ability to erase those mistakes. That's okay. Know that in the real world, in the real world, you'd be using pen. Why?
So then you can't erase it.
So you can't erase it, right? Because this is all about tracking money, and if we're looking for ways to track money and then from a security standpoint, ensure that the numbers on the books match what actually happened. If you did that in pencil, it'd be way too easy for somebody, whether the person who's in charge or somebody else, to come in, erase money basically, and steal money. So realistically, we do this in pen. But again, continue to do it in pencil. But the point here isn't to tell you that we're now going to change over to pen. The point here is to make you aware of the reality of it is that this is done in pen. Well, actually, the reality of it would be this in a real world, this is all done on a computer. So it's somewhat of a moot point. But if a business still used a manual paper accounting system, that would be done in pen. There are going to be mistakes, and there is a formal way of correcting those mistakes. Basically, if you notice a mistake, and how are you going to notice a mistake? We're going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow. But actually we won't talk about it tomorrow, we'll talk about it on Thursday. There's a form that we're going to complete called the trial balance. That is basically going to list all of the accounts and their balances. And then if debits and credits are equal, we know that we're probably accurate. Just like what you've been doing with your individual problems. If the debits have been equal to the credits, you know you have a very good fighting chance of that being accurate. There are some errors. If you find out that those two things, the debits and credits don't match, okay, there are some basic points or places to start from. Because I can just about imagine, and maybe you've done this on your test. You've gone through, you've proven debits and credits, and you're like, crap, it doesn't balance out. They're not the same. Now what? And some of you are thinking, there's no way I'm going all the way back to the beginning. Right? I'll take the points off. But there are some basic techniques that we can use to determine what might have happened. One of them is by looking for an addition error. Typically, if the difference between the two numbers is divisible by 10, or a factor of 10, there's a good chance that there's an addition error, that you've either added or subtracted by 10 or more. Okay, so that's something to look at. If that's the case, then go through and re-add them. If that number is divisible by 9, the difference is divisible by 9, then it might be a transposition or a slide error. Anybody know what a transposition error is? It's simply transposing or switching two numbers around. So instead of 57, you put in 75. Or it might be a slide error, where you slid the number over. So instead of 57, you put in 570. Okay, so those are two techniques that you can use to find errors. Once you find that error, or you notice that error exists, if you find that error early enough, so if that error hasn't been posted yet. So we haven't posted it to the ledger yet. Then we can simply fix that error by simply drawing a line through it again, taking that orange pen, right? Drawing a line through it and writing the correct amount above it. If there's an error in the ledger, we could do the same thing. If you find that you added wrong and that error is in the ledger, that addition error, that slide rule error is in the ledger, you can do the same thing. Cross that out and put the right number in. Erasing is bad. Now, in homework here in class, erasing is okay. But otherwise, erasing is bad. Because if it looks like a number is erased, now a red flag goes up. What's happening here? Are they fixing a mistake, or are they trying to steal some money? If the entry in the journal has been posted, and we posted the wrong amount, or we posted to the wrong account, now we have to create what's called a correcting error. And that's what I want to talk about today. So if we take a look at your study guide, in your study guide you have this. So it's been determined on December 5th that the company Roadrunner paid the registration fee, the $300 registration fee that they needed to pay. They erroneously debited instead of, they erroneously put it in transportation expense that was supposed to be the taxes and licensing fees. Okay, so that journal entry probably looks something like this, right? Debit the transportation expense for $370, credit the cash and bank. What was wrong with that? Where was the error? According to what you see up here, where was the error? The transportation expense account improperly used. Yes. Was the cash and bank account improperly used? No. So the cash and bank is good, right? So we don't have to touch the cash and bank. All we have to do is undo the transportation expense. So how are we going to undo the transportation expense? If it was already debited for $370, how do we get rid of that? What do we need to do? Alex? Credit it, absolutely. Credit it. And this is important because in a couple of chapters here, we're going to get to closing entries, where we're going to have to close out all of the expense accounts. How do you close out an account? You credit an expense account, because expense accounts have a debit balance. You credit that for whatever that balance is. You zero it out. So we're going to credit the transportation expense. Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit, right? So here's our journal entry. We're starting on December 5th. We're on page 2. I'm not going to put the year because I'm going to assume we're already down the page a little bit. We're already working in the current year. Okay, I know, since we're talking about crediting the transportation expense, I'm going to list that as a credit. However, credits are listed in the journal second, right? So I'm going to put that on the second line. So I got to credit transportation expense. Again, why am I putting it on the second line? Simply because I've done this enough to know that there's going to be something that's supposed to go here. But I realize I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit. But since it's easier to understand that we have to undo this first, let's start with it. What should have happened, what should be the debited account? Licenses and fees, right? So I'm going to debit what should have been debited. Taxes and licenses. This came from, what type of source document would you expect this to be? Not listed here again. But what would be the source document that you would expect this to be? Think about your options. Check stubs? Check stub be a likely source document for this? Why not, Alex? You're right. Why not? Why would a check stub not be a likely source document? This transaction is cash being used? No, no cash is being paid. So therefore, cash and bank or check stub wouldn't be used. What about an invoice? Cindy, what do you think? No, why not? You're right. Why not?
I don't know, it's just.
What are invoices used for? Buying and selling on account. Are we buying and selling on account? No. Okay? Receipt. Receipt likely to be the source document for this transaction? What was that?
Isn't it a memo that it's transferred?
Okay. It's a memo, but why is it not a receipt? What is receipt dealing with again? Cash, right? Receiving cash. So it's a memo. Why is it a memo? Because it's just a note that says, hey, I noticed that there's a mistake here. I noticed a mistake, we gotta have somebody fix it. So the source document's gonna be the memo, whatever number you want to put in there. Okay, now remember, we're only half done. Right? From now on, every time we write a journal entry, we have to post those. So we're going to post the $370 debit to taxes and licensing. This hasn't been used yet, so now I need my year, the day, and remember that I said yesterday, the only time you're going to put something in a description column is it's one of those four situations. And this is a correcting entry, and a correcting entry is one of those four situations. So in the description column, I'm going to write correcting entry. The post reference came from General Journal, page 2, and it's a debit of $370. I'm going to check it off up here, account number 560, and then the same thing for the second account. Transportation expense on the 5th. Using a correcting entry. On G2, credit for $370. Zero balance. So to correct it, to create a corrected entry, you simply undo the error, back out of it. then the other half is doing what is supposed to be done. Does that make sense? As you get to the correcting entry parts of the problems in your workbook, probably starting today. Tomorrow, and Mackenzie, this will affect you as well. Tomorrow, as some of you know, is Reality Fair. Okay? So I'll be working the Reality Fair. There'll be a sign on the door. You'll be asked to go to spaces. Sign into a space. Those of you that aren't going to be in the Reality Fair, okay? Go to spaces, and you have your homework problems to be working on. Keep in mind that on Monday is the quiz. Next week, Wednesday, is a test. Kenzie, we won't be in class here. You won't see me on TV, but at this point, you have pretty much everything that you need to do. On Thursday, I'll talk a little bit more in detail about that trial balance. That's pretty simple, honestly. If you look in your textbook, you can get it. All it is listing all of the accounts and then listing your balance. There's some format in terms of single and double rules that we need to talk about, but it's pretty simple. Okay, so be aware of that for tomorrow. Okay? We're working.